Here we go. We get to start Unit 9%. This is very exciting. Brought to you live by my Block C. Everybody say ho ho.
Yeah.
All right. So they're going to be really quiet though so that we can learn all about an introduction to percents, because as we talked about in class, percents are super important in life. They come up in many, many situations. And we talked in class about them coming up with banks, with sports, with discounts and tips and tax. We talked about credit cards and how important it is to be able to save money and many other ways. So let's look at this vocabulary page. Please copy down your vocabulary for the unit. Remember that when you copy this down, you need to be able to read it and you write every word. I'll also have you know that my R's sometimes look like N's, so my apologies. This rate says the percent charged or earned. And again, down here, a percent of the cost of an item which is charged by the government to raise money. All right, looking down here at formulas, you will need to memorize these formulas as they will not be given to you on your test, especially the first two. You will need to make sure that you pay careful attention to simple interest and compound interest because it will save you money in life. All right, looking at 9.1, an introduction to percent. This is where you get to prove that you understand what the meaning of a percent is, that it's out of 100. And if we look at a grid that has 100 boxes, all you have to do is write how many there are out of that 100 as the percent. So for this one, you're really just counting. You know that we have 10 in a row, so that makes this percent just 18%. But remember that we also just talked about ratios and proportions. So that's all going to come into play in this unit. If you need to, you can think of this like 2 out of 5 and change it to a proportion so that I can figure out what X is as the percent. Percent always means out of 100. And percent always has to have a percent sign, otherwise it is not considered correct. So this page should be pretty straightforward. You can use calculators for this page, but if you turn to the next page, you are not allowed to use calculators for this. This is where you're going to be learning mental math. And it is super important for life. This is a life skill. So listen up. If I have to figure out 30% of a number, first of all, that's a huge sale. And that's a pretty good one. You want to go there and buy. But 30% is something that is not as easy probably as 10% or 25% or 50%. But it can be. So what I want you to start thinking of is I want you to think of fractions. If you figure out that 10% is 1/10, you might be able to figure out too that we live in a system of tens. We use numbers that are based on tens. So 1/10 is really just moving a decimal one place to the left. So if I had 100 and I was taking 10% of it, doesn't it make sense that it would give you 10?
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So, if we are figuring out 25%, that's really just 1/4. So I can take whatever my number is and divide it by 4 to find out what 25% is. We can also put together 10% and 25%. So if I have 10% of something and I know what 25% is, 10 plus 25% would be 35%. I can do that with these benchmarks. I can put them together. All right, let's go back a little bit. We also can do 50% pretty easily. What fraction is 50%? Everybody. Half. Nice. So, all you have to do is take half of the number. All right, so back to here. 30% of 250. We want to be able to figure out 30%, but it's not 1/3. That would be 33⅓%. So instead, we're doing 10% 3 times. Does it make sense that we have 3 tens in 30%? So I need to figure out what 10% is by moving the decimal one place to the left. And then I do that 3 times. So if 10% is 25, and I do 3 25s, that is my answer. I know that 75 is 30% of 250. That's the way that it works. If I want to find 1%, of course we get a little ad in here. Nice. Good thing I'm getting a new computer soon. If I want 1%, I can also do 1% by moving the decimal 2 places. Does it make sense that 1% of 100 would be 1? I think so. So anytime you need to calculate that in your head, you just move the decimal 2 places. If you want to calculate 10%, you move the decimal 1 place. If you want to find 25%, you take 1/4 of it. If you want to find 50%, you take 1/2 of it. So looking at the next one, 15%. That's a good tip. If I want to find 15% of 300, I can use a combination. I can find 10% and I can find 5%. And I add those two together. So 10% of 300, I take 300 and I move the decimal 2 places. Wait, that was 1%. Sorry. If I want 10%, how many times do I move the decimal? Only once. That's 30. So I know that 30 is my 10%. But now I need 5%. Oh, let's think about that. How is 5% related to 10%? Well, I'm pretty sure it's half of that. So all I do is figure out what's half of 30. Oh, 15. And if I add those two together, then I know what 15% is, and that's what I should be tipping on a $300 bill, which hopefully you won't have until you're much older. Okay, $45. Go back and make sure, does that make sense? Does it make sense that it would be 45 if we're taking 15% of 300? And I believe so. Okay, continue on. Sometimes you might have to do 100% minus 10%. Like, for example, in 90%. So sometimes we might be adding things, sometimes we might be multiplying. You just have to use your brain and get creative. You can check with your calculator, but please do not use a calculator to do it. And the way that I'll know is based on your explanation. If you don't explain, then I'll know you cheated and used your calculator, or I will think that you cheated and used your calculator.
Don't cheat.
Please don't cheat. Okay, lastly, you did this last year if you were at this school. Fractions, decimals, and percents. We also did this in another unit when we were reviewing fractions and decimals. So remember, to change a fraction to a decimal, you divide. To go here, you divide. Long divide. This one, I will let you use a calculator though. If you could do it without, that's a bonus. To go from a decimal to a percent, remember you move the decimal 2 places to the right. If you're going backwards from a percent to a decimal, you move the decimal 2 places to the left. Don't forget the negative signs anytime they come up. Oh, we did this in the probability unit. That's when we did it. And please make sure you check your answers. All right, that's it for our introduction to percents.
Bye.
See ya.